So I actually thought a lot about what to present here because I have some work on stochastic games that I'm really excited about, which is very much in the mainstream of this conference, and I would love to tell you all about it. But I decided that I would instead talk about generative AI and some economic reflections on generative AI. This is a little bit less mature of a paper, but I think it's really important to apply all the skills that we as economists have built towards this very nascent and significant social change that we're all facing as a society. And so this is my pitch about the value of equilibria. You know, we use equilibria to understand what will happen when people interact in games, and that's a very powerful tool. And it's a particularly powerful tool in society that we face today, where there's this very new technology that is rapidly developing, so rapidly that we don't have very good data about how it's going to impact the games and the markets that we face. And this gives us an opportunity, a unique opportunity, where theory is a particularly powerful tool to think through what are the abstract effects of these new tools on the strategies available to participants in games, and how is that going to change the equilibria that result. This is incredibly significant for Microsoft, where I work, in thinking about where Microsoft should make investments. It's important for regulatory agencies in thinking about how to control these technologies. And all of this is stuff that theory and economic thinking can really help guide. So this is sort of a pitch to all of us to focus our energies on this setting. I've tried to do this a little bit in my own work at Microsoft. We have a new piece, the group that I'm a part of, which is the Economics and Computation group at Microsoft Research. We wrote a new piece that's going to appear in the CACM, which is the computer science newsletter. The ACM is the computer science professional organization, and this is the newsletter of that organization. And there we think about what is the role of AI in a new agentic economy, and how does that change the market structure in an equilibrium setting. So when every individual in an economy has access to a robot butler that you can just delegate tasks to, how does that change things? And one thing that we think is that these robot butlers are going to have really greatly reduced communication costs and search frictions, and that will result in some fundamental changes in market structure in equilibrium. So you can look at that for some of the insights into where the conversation is like at Microsoft right now around these technologies. I've also been thinking a lot about how Copilots, which is Microsoft's enterprise tool for firms that want to automate parts of the production process, how does this change work? And we have been thinking about the sort of abstract impact of artificial intelligence in this kind of environment is that it generates improvements in task productivity, and then you can ask about which tasks are going to get automated and which tasks are going to be augmented in a general equilibrium as firms adopt these tools into their production processes. And how does that change the demand for labor in the economy as a whole? So that's another kind of angle that I think we as economists can really help shed light on that has clear, important consequences for society. And what I'm going to talk about today is a third study. This is joint work with Najib Ali at Penn State, Meena Jagadisan, who was an intern at Microsoft at the time and is going to join UPenn in the computer science department, and Brandon Lucier, who's my colleague at Microsoft. And in this study, we're asking about the impact of generative AI on digital content. So in particular, we're thinking that consumers and creators alike can use generative AI to help produce content. And then the impact of AI here, generative AI, is that it is much cheaper to produce higher quality content by leveraging this tool. So as AI permeates the ecosystem, it becomes cheap for creators to create content, but it also becomes cheap for consumers to create content. And so how does the ability of consumers to compete with creators for content production impact the ecosystem? Will creators continue to exist? What is the quality of content that we'll see in this new ecosystem, and what are the welfare impacts? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'll start with sort of my high-level vision of what the current content ecosystem looks like. We have consumers that are consuming content, and they pay a subscription fee often to a platform to access this content. So you can think about consumers consuming music via Spotify. They pay a fee to listen to music on Spotify. Creators, musicians now, will generate content and post it on Spotify, and they receive a share of the platform's fees, the platform's revenue, as in order to incentivize this service. Alternatively, you have systems like YouTube, where consumers will consume content on YouTube, and instead of paying a fee, maybe they induce a nuisance cost by listening to ads. But in some way, the consumers pay a fee, they consume content via a platform, the creators get a share of the consumer fees. As generative AI has come onto the scene, there's a lot of tools available now to help create the kind of content that consumers are consuming on these platforms. This is a chart that was generated by Sequoia Capital 2 years ago already, and you can see that there's a lot of different tools for digital content creation. We all know about these text-based ones. You also can use generative AI to produce images or even videos. There's audio-based tools and so on. And you can do this to create, like, I thought about trying to create this talk with generative AI. So you could just bypass me as the creator and consume the content without me. That's actually incredibly feasible these days. The New York Times Daily Briefing a few days ago had a test where you were asked to watch videos and see, is it AI or not? And so I took this test, and embarrassingly, I did worse than random. So the AI is getting really good. And so with this new tool, creators can generate content that is of higher quality more cheaply. AI, for example, and even in PowerPoint, I could have used generative AI to help me generate slides for this talk, although I did not. But on the flip side, it's not just the creators that can leverage this tool. The consumers can also leverage generative AI to create the content that they want to consume directly, and thereby bypass the creators, potentially driving them out of the market. And so I became interested in what is the impact of this on the market itself. And you might think that this is sounds futuristic and unrealistic. As many of you know, I just got back from Japan, where I was traveling with some companions who, amazingly to me, spent the entire time talking to ChatGPT about the temples we were visiting and getting kind of a guide through the various neighborhoods by interacting with ChatGPT. And I'm a little bit of a dinosaur, so instead, when I go to cities, I listen to Rick Steves on my headphones and take the Rick Steves walking tour of the cities. But the people are really using these tools to bypass traditional creator content. So what is the impact of such behavior on content ecosystems? And so in this talk, I'm going to present a model that's an abstract model of generative AI technologies and ask, as they improve and become more accessible, what will be the impact of content ecosystems? Who's going to produce the content in these ecosystems? How good will it be? And what will be the impact on welfare? I'll present the model in the next slide, but just to give you a high-level overview of what we'll learn, what we're going to see is that the content creators survive for some intermediate range of production costs. So I'm going to think about the technology as becoming cheaper and cheaper, and the content creators will survive except when the costs are at some extremes. Furthermore, the quality of the content that's generated is going to depend on whether the creators are present in the market. So when they're not disintermediated, when they're present in the market, they're, certainly as costs get cheaper for the technology, the quality goes up. But the marginal impact of an improvement in cost is reduced when the creators are present. And I'll show you why. So I think this has interesting implications for a lot of the studies that we're seeing today about what are the impacts of these tools and how effective are they. And finally, as the costs decrease, then the welfare, of course, goes up, but the creator is going to extract all the gains. This is not the first paper to study the impact of various technologies and systems on, distribution systems on content quality. So there's been a long line of literature in computer science looking at the impact of recommendations on content quality. Here we've been thinking about things like, when you go to Reddit and you can upvote or downvote the posts, and that raises like where they are in the feed. How does that impact the incentives to create high quality posts on Reddit? And this is a sampling of papers in that space. I was actually, if any of you have suggestions, I've been trying to find econ literature in this space as well. This is somehow related to contest design, except that the reward is not really money. This is more like badges or various other rewards that are more like constrained than financial incentives. So there's a lot of literature doing that kind of stuff. There's also, with the rise of AI, a lot of people working on thinking about generative AI tools and how they compete with creators. So how does it impact, is there model collapse? Are we going to see breadth of content and various different verticals? So there's some work in that space. And another line of literature that we speak to is the literature on supply chain disruption. So there's a bunch of classic work in economics. These are just two of the papers that I quite like, looking at exogenous shocks to supply chains and trying to understand the impacts of them. I think the Elias et al. Paper was mentioned yesterday, as I recall, as an interesting study on with an exogenous shock, do we live on a precipice? Did I say that right? Yeah. So let me move into our model in particular. So what I'm going to look at in this talk is consumers that are looking for content. I have a market which consists of, I'm going to say, C consumers and one creator. I'll think about this as a number, but this could also be a mass of consumers. And there's going to be one creator. And so the consumers have all decided they want to consume the type of content that this creator produces. And they can do so by interacting with the creator through a platform. And this platform will distribute the creator's content to the consumers for a fixed transfer of P. This is like the nuisance cost of watching advertising on YouTube or the subscription fee for Spotify. And the content that is consumed is just one type, so I'm not going to try and think about any type of hoteling model, although other work has done that. Here we're thinking about just one type of content, and the content is only vertically differentiated by some quality parameter Q. This quality parameter, I'll assume, represents the value to the consumer of consuming the content. So a piece of content of quality Q is going to cost something to produce. In the paper, we're generalizing this type of cost function, but I think this form of the cost function is particularly intuitive, so I'll present it for the talk. We assume that the number of tokens that it takes to create a piece of content of quality Q is some convex function of the quality Q. So that's C of Q. We'll be thinking about Q squared in this talk. And then the cost per token is some alpha parameter. And so the cost to produce a quality Q piece of content is alpha C of Q. In the game, I'm going to think about participants as choosing whether to trade and at what quality level. So we have the following timing in mind. The creator first chooses a quality Q and then produces content at that quality and pays alpha C of Q to produce it. The consumers, in turn, decide whether to consume content of the creator via the platform, paying a price of P to do so, or alternatively, create their own content, in which case they choose the quality level Q prime of their content and pay a cost of alpha C of Q prime to produce it. The creator then will obtain the revenue P per consumer that joins the platform. So this is the setup. Fixing the strategies of the creator and consumers, the utilities will be as follows. If the creator, if C consumers join the platform and the creator chooses to create content at a quality Q, then the utility of the creator is going to be P times C. That's the economies of scale from the number of C consumers that join the platform. So they get all the revenue from the consumers joining the platform. You could, of course, have revenue sharing between the platform and the creators, but we'll just do this for simplicity. And then the cost of that is going to be, well, they have to generate the content, so they have to pay alpha C of Q. So that's the utility of the creator if C consumers join the platform. The consumers, on the other hand, are going to get, if they choose to consume the creator's content, they'll get Q, the quality of the content, minus P, the fee they pay to the platform. On the other hand, if they choose to produce their own content at some quality level Q, this is also an option for them, and then they get a utility, well, they get Q, a value of Q from the content that they produced at quality Q, but then they have to pay alpha C of Q to produce it. Yeah, so I'm thinking about the consumer as consuming the content of the creator, and then the creator is receiving the platform fee P. Yeah.
All right. So there is no advantage to the creator in terms of cost. Just the only
right.
It's the same alpha. The only thing is that they can share it. They can sell it to many simultaneously. That's the only thing. But creating is the same for anybody.
Yes, creating is the same for anybody. We have generalizations of that in the paper, but I'm presenting it this way because what I find interesting about this market is that the creator and the consumers are competing on quality, not on cost. So, yes, and there's an
consumers access to one,
yeah,
access to many.
Yeah. So there's an economies of scale kind of thing. The creator can distribute their content to many consumers, and the consumer is just producing for themselves, like my friends walking around Japan talking to ChatGPT about temples.
There is nothing, at least in the setup, there is nothing that prevents the consumer from becoming a content creator.
I have not allowed that in this model. I am assuming that the consumers are creating content for their personal consumption. If we could study an entry and exit model in which consumers also can enter and become creators, but we have chosen to focus on this alternative question of when does the creator just get completely shut out. Rachel? Or?
Yeah, so the content creators here, consumers are using, say, ChatGPT, right? There's somebody else who created content that ChatGPT is using.
Yes.
So I'm kind of missing that in this model, because ultimately this will collapse if there's nothing else behind
Yeah, there's a lot of papers looking at model collapse and trying to understand what happens if we stop having human input into the models. Notice I'm not shutting down human input per se. The humans are, you could still iterate with ChatGPT to write your paper, and you can have input into it. It's just that it's become cheaper for you to do so because you have access to ChatGPT. So I agree that model collapse is an interesting question. I've again shut down that channel here, but I also think that I'm not necessarily assuming that the content is entirely AI generated. It could be that AI augments the creation of the content, and then that augmented content is used to learn. And furthermore, I'm not, I guess there's people that are closer to computer science than me, but I'm not that sure that the model collapse is as much of an issue as we tend to think it is. It seems to be doing pretty well, even learning on its own content. And other types of AI systems do well, like, I don't know, Deep Blue or whatever, learning on their own play. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk about other directions at the end of the talk. I think there's some other interesting things I'm not modeling that are very salient and that economics can shed light on. So in this model, I'm going to study a subgame perfect equilibrium, and basically there's two types of subgame perfect equilibria. Either all consumers join the platform and consume the creator's content, I'll call that intermediation, or all consumers produce their own content, and that's disintermediation. So to get an intuition for when we get intermediation versus disintermediation, I'll focus on a simple example with a quadratic cost. So the cost of producing content of quality Q is now Q squared. If the consumers self-produce, what quality level will they choose? Well, they're going to maximize their utility, which is Q minus the cost of producing the content of quality Q, i.e. Q minus alpha Q squared. You can solve this simple equation and see that they're going to choose to produce at quality 1 over 2 alpha, and that will yield them a utility of 1 over 4 alpha. Alternatively, they could consume the creator content of, say, quality Q, which would give them a utility of Q minus P. So in order to attract a consumer, the creator has to generate quality that gives the consumer higher utility. So this Q minus P has to be higher than the 1 over 4 alpha. In other words, the quality that the creator produces has to have this wedge of P to compensate the consumer for the platform fee that they're paying. So the creator must produce content of quality P plus 1 over 4 alpha in order to attract the consumers to the platform. That means that the creator is going to enter the market only if the revenue it gets from the platform exceeds the costs of generating this higher quality content. So we need the P times C, that's the revenue that they get from the platform if the consumers join the platform, to exceed the cost of the quality they would have to generate in order to get the consumers to join the platform. And I've broken this out into 3 terms. The first term that I've written in orange, alpha P squared, is the term that will dominate when alpha, the production cost of the technology, the cost per token of AI, is very high, right? When alpha is very high, that first term dominates. And what you can see is that when the costs are very high, the wedge that the creators have to, of quality that the creators have to generate, this P, they can't afford to create this wedge P. This P, alpha P squared, starts to exceed the revenue they would get from the platform. So they can't generate quality, it's too expensive to generate content that's of high enough quality to attract consumers to the platform. At the other end, when alpha is very low, so AI becomes very cheap, it's very easy to produce high quality content with AI, then the third term dominates, and what happens is that the consumers are creating quality that is higher than what the creator could afford to generate. It's given this budget of PC that they have to spend on generating content. So this example, can be made formal in a more general model, and basically it says that the creators are going to enter the market only for intermediate costs, and the intuition is basically what I said and what Sergio intuited already, that the creator is benefiting from the economies of scale, but is competing with the consumers, and so must compensate them for the platform fee with higher quality content. And at low costs, the creator can't afford this higher quality content because the consumers will just generate higher quality content than the creator can, and the economies of scale don't kick in enough to overcome that. And at high costs, the consumers prefer to generate lower quality content than what the creator would have to generate to draw them to the platform and avoid the fee altogether.
They also profit massively when capital C increases, obviously, right?
Yeah. So in my model, every consumer is going to take the same choice. But we could look at, and I'll plot that on this graph. So in the remainder of the talk, I'll show you some of the comparative statics of what happens as parameters in this model change. So as the mass of consumers, that the size of the market grows, the range at which the range of costs for which the creator is sustained in the market grows. So on the x-axis here, I have the log of the production cost. On the y-axis, I have the number of consumers. And you can see in the green area, which is getting wider and wider, as the number of consumers grows, the range of costs for which the intermediary survives also grows. And that's because there's more economies of scale, so they can afford to do more. On the other hand, we could think about, I've thus far taken this platform fee as exogenous and fixed. And so we could ask what happens as this platform fee, this is exogenous parameter P, grows. And as it grows, you can see that the range of costs for which the creator survives shifts to the left. So when the platform fee gets higher, the left boundary shifts to the left because this higher fee gives the creator more of a budget to create high quality content, and so they're better able to compete with the consumer by generating high quality content because they have more money to do it with. And the left boundary shifts to the left, the right boundary also shifts to the left because as P grows, the consumers are more reluctant to join the platform because this is more costly to do so, and so they tend to prefer this lower quality content for more time. And now the insightful among you will notice that I've gained a lot by assuming this P is fixed, right? Like you could say in an economy, maybe initially, I think this is a good analysis of a short run consequence of AI, but in the long run, you would expect platforms to adjust their contracts in order to set P endogenously or set some kind of contract endogenously in order to maximize their revenue. And so indeed, if we're working on such an extension now, and indeed if you're setting your P endogenously, a revenue maximizing platform will enable the creators to always exist, but the impacts of the creator that I'm going to talk about next, those general intuitions continue to hold in such a market. And also if there's any frictions in setting of P, then we could still get disintermediation. So the interesting point for me in this work was the impact of the creator on content quality. And so you can ask, I don't know if this is the right question to ask, do we care about this as a society? But you could ask, what is the quality of content that people end up consuming in equilibrium? And this is notably different from the welfare, which I'll discuss next, but I think it's still a salient metric. So you can calculate the cost of the quality. I'm doing this for this example, but the same picture holds in general. The consumers, as we already discussed, are producing at quality 1/2 alpha if the creator doesn't exist. So the dashed line on this log-log plot is the quality for any production cost alpha. And it's linear when the creator does not exist. Now, when we have the market in which the creator exists, the one we've been talking about thus far, that's the solid line in this plot. And as we discussed previously, the creator, when they exist, produce quality at content at quality p plus 1 over 4 alpha. And what's interesting is that when the creator enters the market, they're producing at a higher quality, like there's a jump in quality of what people are consuming, because the creator has to attract people to the platform. So they're amping up the quality when they enter the market, starting from the right. And then when they exit the market, that's the point where they're no longer able to compete with the consumers to produce high enough quality to keep them on the platform. And so there's again a jump when they exit the market, because the consumers all of a sudden stop paying the fee and reinvest that money into higher quality content. And so there's these two discontinuous jumps. We start above the dashed line, we end up below it, and everything's continuous. And so as a result, the sensitivity to quality, that is the slope of the tangent of the solid line, is always less than the sensitivity to quality when creators are not present. I find this to be an interesting observation, and especially as we try to think about what is the power of generative AI. Maybe we're underestimating it. Furthermore, we can look at what the social planner that maximizes surplus would do, and the creators, when they enter the market, even create higher quality than a social planner would. This, as I promised, generalizes. This is just kind of restating in words what I already said on the previous slide. And also we can use this model to think about the welfare consequences of having the creator in the market. And of course, the creator, because it's leveraging these economies of scale, can raise the welfare. And it does so, but it extracts all of the surplus for itself. So I'm pretty much out of time. I'll summarize and then have a sort of more general comment. In what I've shown you in this talk, in the context of this particular setting, is that as generative AI technologies improve and become more accessible, we might see disintermediation of creators, especially in our current market structure where platforms charge fixed fees to consumers for consuming content. The content quality in general will improve as the costs of producing it become lower, but the creator depresses the marginal impact relative to a market without a creator. And finally, the welfare is increasing when the creator is present, but the creator extracts all gains for themselves. In a sort of broader conclusion, I want to emphasize that we've seen in this talk the discussion about how the consumers might consume digital content bypassing creators. In fact, I think it's interesting, as I alluded to at the very beginning of the talk, to think about even broader markets, maybe physical markets, and how the introduction of AI assistance will change the games that we play and the markets that we see. So I kind of have this vision of the future that I quite like, where everybody, every consumer and every producer ends up with a little AI robot that sits on their shoulder and helps them navigate markets. And this robot can do things that we can't do very easily in our current market because of a lot of search and communication friction. So my robot can talk to my boyfriend's robot about planning a trip, and then can sort of has access to my calendar, can pick a particular date, then the robots of various producers can suggest that I come to their shows, and all of this happens under behind the scenes from my perspective, and just wake up one day and I have an email in my inbox that says, here's this trip that you could go on with your boyfriend, click to accept, and then all of this gets booked. And I think that would be a fantastic future. Thank you. Thank you.
Your boyfriend's AI carefully.
Yes.
I only have a funny question. Why does the AI have to ask you whether you want it? Maybe the AI accepts for you.
I would be okay with that. I think a lot of people are not. But, you know, eventually it'll know me better than I know myself, and it can like, you know, be aligned with me, then I would be okay with that.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about complementarities between the content creators and AI. So content creators can use AI too, and maybe they're better at creating music than I am using AI. So how
Yeah.
would that change these dynamics? But then the AI, the creators come back, obviously the creators are coming back into the picture, presumably in force in that, but do you have a sense of what that would do?
Yeah, so we've looked at a model where the cost of using AI to generate content, that alpha is higher for the consumer than the creator. If the form of how alpha plays into the cost is linear, like in my model, these general results still go through. If it's a little bit more complicated, then the answer is more complicated. But that is something we're trying to look at.
Yes, I guess, thank you for the talk. I guess the question is, how much can you kind of generalize this thing? Because I guess one of the assumptions is like everyone is happy with, you know, the kind of same level of quality. But if you think about music, maybe there are some people that really are not going to accept to have music under a certain quality, and maybe AI is not able to generate music over a certain quality. Can you kind of do something with like a distribution of preferences?
Yeah, so I've had, my consumers are all of one type here, but you could certainly ask for the consumers to have different sensitivities to quality. And then someone had mentioned like the size of your market is going to change as the alpha changes endogenously. And I think that's what would happen. Like at first I could only attract to the platform the very insensitive consumers, or you know, the ones like that accept a low quality, and then I will, yeah. So I think that the general sense of things would hold, but that it would kind of change because you would have both on and off platform consumers.
Thanks for the talk. Quick question. So much like the Spotify example you had in the start, technically you could have these models have a subscription fee as well, rather than like a per token or like a per token fee. I guess in a situation like this, or in a market like that, where I subscribe to ChatGPT or to cloud or something, then there's some bundling effect I can imagine happening. If I'm using ChatGPT to produce code, I might as well produce it to use it to produce images because there's no additional fee. Do you see, like, what do you think would be the impact of that kind of like bundling or subscription as opposed to per token cost?
Yeah, we haven't, like, as I said, we have a more general model of the costs, which I haven't tried to think, like, we need certain single crossing conditions and whatnot, so I'm not entirely sure, like, in real time if the subscription fee would fit that. But another thing that's kind of related to this is there's multiple model providers, and so you could ask about competition between model providers, which is something we did look at, and these results still follow.
What is AI here? I mean, what you're really showing is technological change of costs.
Yes.
What is special? I mean, and it's very sexy to say AI today, yes, of
I
course.
agree. I think
it's really standard economic analysis of technological advance.
But I think that's part of my point. Like, I think this has become a very salient time for us to study standard, and a lot of the things I've tried to do, I'm like, oh, this is just a reduction in search frictions. This is just a reduction in communication costs. This is just an improvement in production technology. And you know, all of this is stuff we need to think about. And here, the sort of thing that's different from standard models is that I have this like competition on quality instead of on costs. But like, it is a standard economic model, and that's why economics is so powerful. Like, theory is powerful because we can use it and all the stuff we already know. I'm not doing anything new here. I'm just using it to shed light on what we should expect to happen and what we might be concerned about as a result. I'll say one more thing, which is another of my favorite examples in AI is that it becomes harder to do costly signaling. Like when I write a recommendation letter that's 5 pages long, 5 years ago, you know I like that student. Now you think, did I use AI to write the letter, right? Like, how does this is, again, a problem we already have studied in economics, but like, can we think more deeply about the consequences of it and what we could do to overcome it?
Great, thanks again.